We are live. I'm gonna work on display.
We have the recorder.
The guy she married.
I don't do.
Was really friendly.
So we're gonna rely on this.
He wanted to tell us.
As long as it's working on hers.
You want? You can grab my backpack and you can try the cord that I usually use.
Yeah, I didn't know
I deliver Bella.
I was down there. Yeah. I went to.
This should be okay. This should be it. I just have to plug this in.
Five more, huh?
We can go ahead and get started, and I'll try to get I was just gonna pull up the meeting packet, but we can go ahead and get started.
Guaranteed to keep it recording at this point?
It's going.
Okay.
We might even, yeah. Just finished it up. It's being super glitchy today.
Maybe we're not gonna be able to do it.
Well, we might just not be able to use the screen, but that's okay.
All right. We'll go ahead and get started. Look, will you lead us in pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yep. Anybody here from Clayton?
Clayton, you have the EMS.
Oh, he did say that. That's right. All right. Okay, so this is, this portion of the meeting is the city council meeting. It's gonna be really fast. Sam Strebel, who was serving on the planning commission, has resigned. She took a new position at work that requires more of her time. She's unable to continue serving, so we have interviewed some others. One of whom is here today, McKenna Marchant, and so Katie and I interviewed her, and we think that she would be a great addition, and basically would like to appoint her to the planning commission. She's got a lot of experience. Yeah, I'll get to that. So she's got a lot of experience, and actually, if you want to just kind of introduce yourself real quick and give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so my husband is from here, so named Marcia, it's a little familiar, might ring some bells. I brought an entourage tonight. I am from Cambridge, Utah, so small town. I was kind of nervous to move up here because it's a little bigger than I anticipated the community I would live in one day, but I have served on West Jordan's Planning Commission. I also served for a time as a city planner in Vineyard City. I got my master's in public administration at the University of Utah, which is kind of like an MBA but for the public sector. And I currently work for the state with bonds as a program manager.
Perfect, thank you. So with that, I'll entertain the motion to appoint McKenna Marchant to the planning.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Did you make the motion?
I'll make
Did you make it?
No.
Yeah.
I'm doing queen
I mean, I will.
stuff. I'm sorry, I'm rodeo queen.
I will, I make a
Okay,
motion.
Jeremy made it and I seconded it, there we go.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, done deal.
But now she's gotta move up.
Yeah, you gotta move on.
Can't stay back there now.
Thank you, and we're sorry.
Welcome.
Too late now.
We're happy to have you, so, thank you. All right, we will go ahead and, take a motion to adjourn the city council meeting, and then we'll go into the work session.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn the city council.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Okay. We are now in the, work session with the planning commission. Thanks for being here, planning commission. Also present is the city attorney, Brad Christopherson. Real quick, first item on the agenda is the RDA discussion. I've talked with each of you on the city council individually about the RDA and what that means. I just wanted Brad here to kind of explain that a little more in detail. This is just informational. We'll take 10 or 15 minutes to kind of go over it. The planning commission can hear kind of what the deal is and what we're kind of leaning toward and where we're going. And then we'll move into the actual reason for the meeting, and that's the Burton Ranch annexation. So, Brad.
All right, RDA is redevelopment agency. So it's a tool that cities can use to help fast forward development. And what it will allow you to do is tax increment financing. So what that does is a developer can, if the city's in agreement, the city can create a redevelopment agency. That's step one. And then we create what's called a CRP, a community reinvestment project area, CRPA. Most of them just shorten down to CRP. So you create this area, and what we're thinking of, and we've been approached by a developer and said they'd be interested in doing this and to see if the city would participate in this. And what it does, it allows the city to shave off a portion of the property tax revenue. And if you get participating tax entities, which in this particular situation we likely will, it allows us to funnel more of that money that comes in from property tax. And it's only property tax that we can use. So I can go as high level or as detailed as you want to go on this, but I thought it might be helpful for me to kind of throw up a whiteboard. We'll have it up here and just throw up some numbers on that to give you an example. So right now, the two properties that we're looking at for sure including are the ones right out front here on the corner, right? So those two properties consist of 2.48 acres. And right now they are,
I have some other ones if people would write out.
there we go.
There we go. Now we can see it.
Okay, 2.848 acres. Right now, the city on those two parcels gets a combined $379.59 in property tax every year. That's how much those two parcels generate property tax. There's no buildings on them, there's no improvements, there's horses. The city doesn't tax horses. So, so if you were to create the RDA, that's the redevelopment agency, and the redevelopment agency just in general, city council members and the mayor would be board members of the RDA. So it goes hand in hand with the elected office. So we create that. That's a process we go through with the lieutenant governor's office. And from there, we can decide, once this is created, that's a one-time step. You only do that once, and then you can have different community reinvestment project areas. You can do those multiple times and across different areas and places. Typically, cities use those to develop commercial, right? And the reason you develop commercial is simply because you create a tax base with it that you don't otherwise have. Francis has very little commercial, and that's been the case since its conception, right? There's just not a lot of commercial here. It is bringing additional commercial in the last decade, but it's not enough to really offset a lot of things. Some of these projects that have been approved have the potential to generate some pretty significant tax dollars, at least as a percent. So the reason why I brought this number up is because this is 2023, the number, that was 2 properties generated combined in 2023. So if we're to adopt an RDA, create an RDA and adopt a CRPA and include what we're likely going to need in order to make this worthwhile and generate enough revenue, is everything that's currently in the city center zone. So that is the majority of property right around City Hall, but it's, you know, on 32, on 35, that stuff. It's not going to be too much more than that. We can get more detail than that, but anyway, just for purposes of the general discussion, that's what we likely need to include. So when we do tax increment financing, and what it does is you rebate some of the property tax money that's generated back to the developer to help offset the cost of doing it. And it brings in development maybe faster than it otherwise would on its own. So this number is important because that sets the floor and helps you determine what your increment is. And what it means is the difference. So I used just a round number. Katie and I looked at this a little bit, and I got a little more in depth. But one of the other things I looked at was, what does Foodtown generate? The 2 big parcels, Foodtown and development there. I didn't use the office building, and I didn't use the gas station. But between those 2 parcels, the kind of the strip mall there and the Foodtown, that generates, let's see, it's assessed at 3.497 million. Okay, is that right? Or go ahead. No, sorry, that's the increment, or that's the, hang on a second. So it's 5.9 million is what it's assessed at, roughly, and it generates 36,000. And this, when I say property tax, this is the portion that's generated for the city on these 2. This particular one, 36,617.53. That's the number of property tax generated by those 2 buildings. And there's, I want to say it was pretty close to this. It's about 2.6 acres between those 2 parcels. 36,000 what it generates. Camas City's portion is $6,238 roughly. There's some change, but so the city portion is not the lion's share. So typically in Francis, so if this is the portion generated from that on a year's time, the school district will be about 3 times that. So, you know, you're close to about $1,000 on that property out front, because generally goes to the school district. And what we really need to do in this to generate enough dollars to make it worthwhile for both the city and the developer, and the costs that are incurred, you know, for both entities for doing that, we would need to have other taxing entities participate. So we would need the county, likely. We would also need the school district. And there's nothing that says they have to, so you've got to go in and get their consent and participation in this in order likely to make it pencil. But the numbers that I ran, and these again, if the assessed value on these 2 parcels after build out was up to 5 million. And it could be less than that, it could be more than that, it just depends on the project. So we take, in order to get the increment, and how you calculate that, you would take the 5 million versus what it's assessed today. And it's assessed today at 361,520. That's the tax assessed value right now by the county assessor for those 2 parcels out front. They're 2.48 acres. So the increment that you would be basing your numbers off of in your investment area on those 2 parcels would be the difference. So you take that, and the new value that's been added is 4,638,480. So that's the new number. And then if that generated, so the city's portion would become $4,800 roughly, using the 2023 tax rates.
South Summit, School District, they have $17,000 that is their portion. Again, that's the difference between what was assessed at and what it was assessed at, would be assessed at $5 million. And then Summit County would be about 2,200. There's multiple lines that Summit County has in the property tax bill. So this was the general line. So anyway, in order to, those three, just on those two parcels, the increment would be, again, at $5 million assessed value. If that was the new value, it would be 24,500. So I don't expect you to be able to follow this and recreate what I'm doing, but so that's how much new money would come to the city. The South Summit School District and the county. So if they were all participating, that's the maximum amount of money that you could put and funnel to the developer if everybody agreed at 100%. So of the new money. So the developer in this case is asking for about $50,000 a year for about 10 years. So in order to have that pencil and make sense, there's a couple different things that have to, either we have to expand the community reinvestment project area, which is what Katie and I talked about a little bit. Or the other is that the investment dollars that go into this have to be higher. So the number has to be assessed at a much higher number than that to generate $50,000 in increment. And the city will not, on that alone, the city will not generate $50,000 on that property alone. It just can't. And that's it. That's it, the city. So we've got to expand that. Anyway, and one of the things so if you look at kind of neighboring cities, and I looked at tax rates, for the last few days in neighboring cities. One of the things that you'll notice, so if you look at Coleville has a higher tax rate, property tax than Francis does. Oakley has a lower tax rate than Francis has. Camas has a lower tax rate. Both of those cities have bigger commercial than what Francis has. So it's just kind of one of the things that happens when you expand and grow your commercial. Residential tax rate and city tax rates can typically, because there's not a deduction on commercials like there is in residential. So commercial, you have the full assessed value. There's not any exemptions on it for residential use or primary home use. And so you get the full value of the assessment and the full rate. And that offsets costs and things to cities. I've talked for a while here. Does any of this make any sense?
I do have a question. The $5 million assessment, is that based off of property value?
That's based off property and buildings. So typically, right now, the property, it's not market value, but the property is assessed at $361,000. There's usually a trail behind. Assessed values are usually way behind, at least a minimum of 3 years, typically, and sometimes they can be wildly off.
That's just the value that the county assessor is.
Yeah, that's the county assessor has assigned that value on that based on its formula, which I can explain that, but it's bigger for people. They pull their hair out. So,
Is this really worth it for a town our size that doesn't have any commercial to speak of?
that is a hard question to answer. It depends.
I have time.
It depends. That would typically, is an RDA a way to speed the development or redevelopment of certain things? Absolutely. Is that what the city wants? The reason that you push for commercial is to blunt or to limit the potential tax increases on property tax for just everybody. So if you have sales tax being generated by a commercial entity like Food Town or some other, pick a restaurant, anybody that's selling anything.
Yeah.
Right, the city gets a certain portion of that comes in and offsets their costs on maintaining roads and everything else. They generate tax revenue at a higher rate. If you look at it, this is not the way that I look at it, but I've had experts talk about this. A residential home in a community costs more money than it brings in. It just does. It costs more money. You get one call for service there. That the fire district or anything like that, people don't operate it as businesses, governments operate as a business, but you lose money on residential from a taxing standpoint.
So after 10 years, then that 50,000 would go to the city.
The full amount of the, whatever increment was committed would go, and it can go beyond 10 years, but that was the initial ask, and said, hey, can we look at this? And so we're looking.
How much more additional property would it require than the 2 lots?
So it would likely need, so it reduces the amount, in order to generate that money, it reduces the amount of property we need if we get the school district and the
County.
county to participate.
What's the likelihood of that?
Don't know yet. I would guess with the school district and their failed bond, that they may not be willing to participate though. That makes it a much heavier lift because their tax rate is more than 3 times what the city's is, right?
So then to make up their 17K, we'd have to incorporate
A much bigger area,
like 5 more acres. The entire,
35 more
like
acres
35 more.
or more.
So like the
Correct.
entire commercial zone?
So potentially, it could be.
Or the entire
so
city
it's the city
center.
center.
Well, the entire city center zone, but we may need to take it down towards Kansas City.
Right.
But then again, what it does, the only difference you're able to do is new dollars generated. So you set the floor, if you trigger the project area, right? As soon as you trigger that, and we would have guidance, so you have to hire, in order to do this, the state code requires we have an independent firm, and typically there's 2 that do this a lot. There's more than that, but 2 that you see very common: Science Public Finance, Science Bank Public Finance, and then Lewis and Young. Those are the 2 that will typically provide your financial analysis for your CRPA. And what they'll do is they'll come in and say, okay, you want to have a project area, and here's the kind of initial parameters. In order to make this pencil to give you this much tax increment, you've got to do this or this or this or a combination of those, which is bigger area. But again, it only changes. So, for example, Francis Commons is out here that has a commercial component but isn't built yet. If that were to get triggered before that comes online and before that's built, then the new tax money that's in there can be generated. The new checks can be used as part of that increment financing as well.
So Brad, the 50,000 that they're requesting, that would basically take the whole city center zone, all of the increments from the whole entire zone and take it to
Well,
one property?
I don't know that, so
Okay.
that's why we have to do that analysis.
Right, you have to do the
But-
math on it.
Do we have a heavy lift to get there?
What kind of commercial do you want to develop? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So,
Anything that gets built, if we do this,
Mhm,
giving them tax rebate,
right,
I'm reverting back to the hotel.
Mhm.
Does the new development then have to have a moderate income component to it? Housing?
maybe. So that it can.
Yeah, but I thought it was the reason, the legislature told us.
So there is a housing component to this, but it doesn't necessarily have to be moderate, but there is a housing component to this.
Okay.
So they may have to designate a couple as low-income housing, but that's not necessarily moderate, but it's still, that's why this one qualifies and the other one didn't.
And also because they're a small business, is that part of it?
There is a small business exception as well, that can do it, and this bigger developer qualifies under that portion of the act.
So if we go into this and we do this down the line, the city then could see more housing, a housing component connected to each of the commercial projects, possible.
So this is a mixed-use project that's already been approved from a zoning and even, do we have a development agreement? Remind me.
From the other guy that.
We didn't do a development agreement.
Okay,
We
I
drew the
think so.
site plan and
Yeah, the site plan, everything's approved, so,
From the developer that wants the RDA?
Whose property is this?
whose was it when it was approved, or who's it now?
Whose is it now?
It's Rusty Webster's.
What kind of commercial are they proposing?
Don't know that yet. So there would probably be some, I would imagine a coffee house, I'd imagine, something like that, some sort of cafe, some
The
restaurants.
project that's there now is like strip mall-ish,
Yep.
With
No,
housing.
nobody-
On the
housing
bottom of the
above.
housing.
Yeah, so it's a mixed use project.
Right.
A true
No
mixed-
businesses actually committed to
Yeah.
What do you mean?
renting any location, buying.
It's on mixed use.
Just
It's right here.
It's right around the corner.
Oh, right over here.
Yeah, right next to the new
The
city
guy
hall.
that went through the roof thing.
Where the horses used to be.
Yeah, right here on the corner.
Yeah, they were there last week and now they're probably changed hands.
Am I missing something? Like, doesn't sound like we can lift this. Doesn't sound like what he's asking we can do.
Well, the way I see it
So,
too.
so on just those two properties, you're right, we can't.
the
So it
sign
has to be bigger. And the question is, and this, the council said, gosh, this is a big deal, let's make sure, Mayor wanted to include the planning commission. I want you to understand the planning commission has no ability to say yes or no to this, other than their influence on the council. So there's no portion of this that says,
My influence.
the planning commission has, nothing on this comes before the planning commission. But Mayor Harmon thought it was important you guys understand this, because this is a big deal for Francis, if we do
That's
this.
a really big.
So,
Can I
So-
just say my opinion real fast?
Yeah, that's what we're here.
Okay, I think that if this developer is proposing wanting this RDA and it's going to take those two properties in addition to either the school and the county's portion, and if the school doesn't give us their portion, we're gonna have to increase that to include a lot more acreage, that would only benefit this one developer for 10 years.
Sure.
Whereas maybe if they want
Well,
a smaller
potentially.
portion, potentially.
so,
maybe.
so the difference is, I would never recommend that you, let me just qualify that, because I think you're going down a good line of questioning. So the city can do 100% minus administrative costs. So there is going to be a cost to the city to set this up, right? And they get reimbursed those costs over the life of that project area. So the city can do this. It's not worth it for the city to do that.
No,
It's just not. So I wouldn't recommend for the city to do more than 50%. But if, let's say that number is 10 million, right? And the tax rate doesn't change. All of a sudden the city's portion becomes 12,400, right? So it's a completely different analysis. And so it all is going to depend on what the new assessed value is and what our projections of that new assessed value will show with the financial analysis. I mean, if it's $20 million, then it becomes a lot easier. It just depends on what is built.
Yeah, is there a guarantee, if Rusty puts something up there that's gonna make the assessed value of 20 million, he's gonna want more than 50,000.
Well, he'd be locked in. So if we go to this point, we say, okay, we'll do it, we'll figure it out to get you to 50,000. And we wouldn't commit to that. We would commit to a percentage. Sure. Right? And if we could get the county, but the idea behind this is you wouldn't otherwise, that's why it has this difference, right? So you start with the floor, this is what you're getting today, that $379. And because of your helping a developer bring this in, the tax increment financing, and help offset some of their costs for development. And the money that we would do would likely go into infrastructure, like maybe the sidewalks that are public, right? Maybe the storm drain or the piping of the drainage that has to happen because of that. That's the kind of thing that you would put the city money into, and it's not just, oh, we just cut a check to the developer every month and it passes ROI. I mean, it does, but it does it in a
Can we
public.
let her finish?
Yeah,
I would recommend that whatever the proportion is for the land that we have to include in the RDA is proportional to what the developer gets from RDA. So they don't get 100% minus administrative costs, they don't get 50%, they get whatever their proportion is of the total land that's required for the RDA, because the point of the RDA is to encourage development along that proportion. So if the point of this, if what we want is to create a larger tax base for the city, then what we want is to generate more tax base along that entire RDA. So not allowing them to take 50%, not allowing them to take 100%, but whatever is required for their lots. So that is where we're going to benefit. That is what they're going to get in tax.
sure, and I see what you're saying, but if that's the case, you'll never get to the 50,000.
Then they'll have to take it or leave it.
Well, and if you're, I mean, at that point, I'm just being blunt, it just isn't worth it.
To do the RDA or for them to develop?
It isn't worth it for the administrative costs and all of that, or for them. I mean, usually usually use those that it's not solely to benefit that project. So let's say, for example, this particular project, and I think our planning on our water line sizes, we don't need to up, for the full development of this project, our water line doesn't fail, does it? So sometimes you have an RDA where a water line has to be upsized because of the type of development. Typically it's because of densification, and 30 years ago, people weren't planning on, the density that is going in around the state. And so oftentimes what will happen is you'll have a 6-inch water main that is for a 8-inch sewer line, and you have to, once this new project comes online, that sewer line doesn't have the capacity to handle all the development. And so you would use the RDA as a tool and that tax increment financing to upsize the water line or upsize the sewer line and replace that, and that's the project. So it doesn't just benefit this particular project, but it benefits the whole corridor, right? That's the kind of things you would use, but there's always a catalyst to get that started. And because this developer is the one that's starting the project, causing this to fail, they would get the benefit, but they would have the cost to pay up front of putting in that upsized lines. Kind of thing. Or a bond, and the tax increment would go to pay back that bond to cover it. So it's typically what you don't usually see, and the legislature came out and made very strict exceptions, very few exceptions, where you can actually just cut a check to the developer. You just can't do that. So, and that's a good point to bring that up, but the proportion that it likely doesn't make sense for the city or a developer to do it like that. It depends on the need, but I don't know that there is any other than the storm drain and the potential of sidewalks. I don't think there is any other component to this that could be used as a public infrastructure kind of. I guess the paving of the parking on the 45-degree parking, I guess if it's available to the public, that might be able to be used. On-street parking? The on-street parking, because that's not limited to, that's public, and anybody can use it, not just on that. So there's a couple of things that could be used for the benefit of the whole public and not just this one developer. So that's what we would target. And if it doesn't, that's why we have, this is a very cursory overview just for purposes to start the conversation, not to say these are the numbers. We've got to hire somebody else, engage somebody else, Science Public Finance or Lewis and Young, to have them do the analysis and say, okay, here's what it's going to take in order to generate this amount of money, or here's what you could possibly generate. Here's the 10%, 25%, 50%, and here's the maximum value we see this generated in increments for this particular project.
So there'd be a lot of exploration left to do. My only question would be, how much does that exploration cost before we end up in
typically what we would do, how when we have a big project that has a lot of building inspections to be scheduled, we require the developer to post a cash bond with the city. And then, so all the effort going into this, we would get an estimate together and we would say, Mr. Developer, whether it's Rusty, whether it's any other developer that wants us to do this, we think it's going to cost $20,000 to get this put together, right? And so we want to build it against that, but those will be included in that coming back to you because you're paying for it up front, right? And so that would be part of that cost that would be, but the city the size of Francis, if it's a Salt Lake City, they can float that, no big deal, and get it back. They have a, with their airport, $2 billion or $3 billion budget. Francis, $20,000 is a significant portion. So there's quite a bit of fees and work that have to be paid to the state and stuff to create the RDA and get that stuff going. But
what's a rough estimate of that? Just a typical RDA?
I think $20,000 is probably a good number to. That would probably get us through the analysis and creating the CRPA.
Is it always a 10-year?
No.
Could we go down to a 5-year?
Yeah. So typically the bigger the investment and the bigger that increment, the longer it goes out because you're getting an investment that is, there's one in Salt Lake County that their increment that they get back, and it's for public infrastructure that they used to build all that. But it's, it was in the tens of millions of dollars.
Okay.
But the investment is billions. So.
Yeah, I mean, this
So,
is not
yeah.
even, you know.
Yeah, well, and,
What is it? Amazing.
I mean, part of it is kind of, let's just, is a $5 million, investment into the city and the ongoing future. And typically, if this, like, for example, here with this particular project, real estate activity begets real estate activity. So the idea behind it is there's kind of a loss leader on the first one, and then others come in and help offset, and then you've got some base to begin to grow. Anyway, that's kind of the philosophy behind it. The question for the council is, and we're not voting tonight on anything. It's just something to think about. Is this something you're interested in pursuing? Do you think this makes sense? Should we follow this down? I mean, the risk to the city is minimal. We go to the developer and say, we want you to put this in. We think this is going to be $20,000 to get there. We're going to bill against that. And then if we decide to go forward with it, then you'll get that back over time. Right? And then the city's not out anything. The city will always have its RDA once it's created and can use it in other areas to create an additional project area. But, that's kind of the question. Do you want to explore this enough to say, yeah, this makes sense, or maybe we've done an initial look at it that we know that it's got to have, and timing is a part of this, right? So if the Francis Commons stuff comes online before we trigger it, then the floor is much higher. If it's not online and it is dirt, but when we trigger it, the difference gets to be pretty big, right? I mean, more than it otherwise would be.
Right.
And assuming that's part of the project area as well.
All right. Any other burning questions right now? Because we've already got way further than I
I think it would be helpful to kind of get a number of what would make this worth it. Like what type of investment would make it worth doing an RDA?
Well, and how much property too, because you threw out 35 acres. That's a lot. I mean, that's nowhere close to 2.48.
Right, so I'm shooting from the hip, just to be totally blunt. I'm not the math guy. I'm not the financial analysis
Your
guy.
whiteboard looks like you're in that.
So their analysis will be much more in depth and have much more variables included in it. I took basically what it's generated today and what it would be if the tax assessment was, and I just picked a number, right? $5 million, because that was approximately what Food Town's assessed at. So that's the only reason I picked that. So I don't have any idea what the project is going to cost. I don't have any numbers on that.
Cool. So,
Anyway.
all right, thanks, Greg. All right, next item, Brooklyn Ranch communication discussion.
All right, so Jeremy, if it's okay with you, can we take a minute just to introduce everyone since we have a new planning commissioner?
Sure.
Just name and whether you're on the city council, planning commission, or staff.
Good luck.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm Katie, you know me. I'm the city planner.
Scott Kettle, city engineer. Bob Murphy, planning commission.
Sam Howard, council.
And Summers on your council. Justin, I'm on the planning commission.
Kimberly planning. McKenna planning.
I'm Shannon Pryor and I'm on city council.
I'm Jeremy, I'm the mayor, sorry.
Sorry.
And you know Brad.
You met Brad.
All right, fantastic. So, Mayor, how much detail do you want me to go on my staff report? I know the city council has already really heard pretty much the same staff report. So do you want me to hit the highlights before we get into a discussion, or do you want me to go through it?
Yeah, I think the highlights is good for now, and then if there's, if that doesn't cover it, then we've got time for questions or whatever, so. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so the property that we're looking at, potential annexation, is north of the intersection of Lambert Lane and Hallam Road. It's 3 parcels, and this is the Hart Crossing development. So it's right across Lambert from that development. The property is intersected by the canal, and it also borders the city's sewer ponds. Total acreage, let's see, let me put down.
90 and some change.
Yeah, 92.1. So the city council did accept the petition for consideration at their last meeting in April. And we have a little ways to go before we would approve an annexation. And that's really why we're here tonight, is to discuss some of the issues and think about what studies need to be done and what information we need, what we like about the concept plan, what we wish we could change. Those are all the things that we want to talk about tonight before we get going too far in the decision-making process. So annexations go through several steps. We're on step number 5, which is evaluating the petition. We've already accepted it, and now we're evaluating it. Eventually, we will have a planning commission public hearing and a city council public hearing, and at least one meeting with each of those. And then we'll decide, there will be a protest period, and then we'll decide whether or not to grant or deny the petition. As a reminder, annexation is completely legislative. So that means that it is up to our city council's discretion on whether or not we want to approve or deny the annexation. Okay, getting into the analysis, we look first at the general plan. I'm not going to go into all the policies. I'll hit so I did mention in the city council meeting that I changed my format a little bit on staff reports. So anything in italics is my analysis and my staff input. It's not the code, it's just my analysis of it. So one of the things in the general plan that we talk about is wanting to encourage conservation subdivisions. This is a conservation subdivision. They are proposing setting aside over 70% of the land for open space. So it meets that goal. They will develop 30%, so that portion would no longer be used for agriculture. The open space is adjacent to the city sewer ponds. So being able to continue to use these ponds, having conservation land right next to them will provide a buffer between the ponds and development. So that is a benefit to the city. If we don't annex this property and future development is allowed to occur near the ponds, then we would have to look at purchasing property as a buffer, which, as you can imagine, would be pretty expensive. We also want to think about connectivity of our open space. That's one of the goals of the general plan. This property is adjacent to part of the Ure property, which is under contract as an open space, potential open space with Summit County. So this could provide connected open space. Looking at some of the other goals, so we talk about making sure that we grow it at the right rate, and we look at our population projections. Right now, looks like from the population projections that we need about 1,000 new we're gonna have 1,000 new residents in the next 20 years. And I've seen that fluctuate a little bit, sometimes it's higher. But if we have 1,000 new residents, then we probably need at least, well, about 500 units. We're planning on about 2 people per unit, which is close to the average. So we actually already have about 500 entitled units in the city. Those are ones that we've have a development agreement on or an approved subdivision, and they haven't pulled a building permit yet. So we do have that stock available, but it's really not in our control of when those get built. That's up to the developer. So some of the projects like Circle T have taken 20 years and they're still not built. We were still not pulling building permits. Foothills of Francis Gate, that's been around a long time, and they're just now getting closer to being able to pull building permits. So we also need to look at whether or not we can provide the water and sewer infrastructure. And the applicant knows this, but they do need to supply the water for the development. They need to turn in the required water shares, and it looks like they do have enough water to do that. So Just to recap, there are several benefits to the annexation, the open space, especially in proximity to the sewer ponds. Keep in mind, this property was formerly in the West Hills Incorporation area, and the developer has requested that they be, excluded from that area. So they've requested to be excluded. They would like to be part of Francis. If it's annexed into Francis, we have the ability at this point to determine how it's developed. If it goes to West Hills, we have absolutely no say in that at all. So something to keep in mind. The next portion that we're looking at is the city code. And sorry, going to a bigger picture here. This is the annexation survey of boundaries, which is same boundaries we talked about earlier. And then the next part that I'm talking about in regards to the code is the concept plan. So they're proposing this with AG1 zoning, Ag1, so 1 lot per acre overall. With the conservation subdivision, they get density of 1 lot per acre, plus they get an incentive. So with the incentive, they get 106 units, which is exactly what we have planned here. They're showing 84 single-family homes, 21 townhomes, and then 1 caretaker unit that would probably be located somewhere on the open space. It would be for whoever operates the open space, and we're not sure the location yet, but that gets us to 106. So the concept plan they're showing hits that number exactly. Let's see. And then they keep 70, total open space is almost 75%. And their concept plan is showing that everything, all the development would be on the south side of the canal, and open space would be on the north side. One thing to consider is that the county has a road, the Hallam extension, planned through basically from Hallam all the way to 248, so through this property. And when we considered the annexation petition they submitted a year and a half ago, they had a road connecting Hallam to 248 through the property. That was part of their concept plan, but they're not proposing that now because they're only building on the south side of the canal. So we would need to talk to probably the county and talk about that road. And I think that we would need to plan a connector road through the concept plan that doesn't have driveways on it, because we're going to see quite a few trips on that road. We don't want, just for safety's sake and speed limits, we want to have no driveways on that. So we might need to tweak the concept plan for that. Another thing I noticed is one of the requirements for a conservation subdivision is that external roads have to be set back a minimum of 100 feet from a building pad. And these look to me about 50 feet, so that needs to be adjusted. And then we do have 2 lots with driveways on Lambert. We don't really recommend that, but it's not really our policy to allow that on a connector road, but we can make exceptions. So we have to think about whether or not we want to make the exception for that. And then last, the townhomes and some of the single family homes are served access by an alley. And that isn't haven't typically done that, especially for single family homes. We have done it for townhomes, but not for single families. So we need to think about that and talk to the fire district and see if they're okay with it. So
Would those alley-facing townhomes, alley-loaded townhomes, so the front doors are facing that open space, correct? For the alley-loaded townhomes?
I don't think we've just figured out if they're alley loading or front.
right?
Do you have a plan for that, or is it just kind of a placeholder right now?
Just a placeholder.
Right, we haven't looked at that yet. Okay, so I think that kind of summarizes what I was going to talk about. As I mentioned before, we're not making a decision tonight. We just really want to have a discussion about this. and about, one thing that I didn't mention that was in here is the future land use map. So the future land use map for this area shows that it would be zoned Ag 2. And they're requesting Ag 1 zoning, so we need to discuss if that makes sense or not. Other than that, I think that's all I had, and we will have other discussions in Planning Commission and City Council about this later. This is just a chance for us to all hopefully get on the same page. That's it for me.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things before we kind of get into the discussion of this whole project. I'd like to remind everyone, and I do this all the time on annexations, don't get too hung up on the concept. It's only a concept that can be negotiated, it can be changed, it can be a lot of things. Of course, it's an idea of what they're thinking. It gives us an idea of what things would look like. But the real question that we have to determine first is, do we want to add this 92 acres into the city? And then second, does this concept work? If this concept doesn't work, what concept does work? But the main focus really is, first, do we want this into the city? And then we can work out the concept as we go through the process. And then also, I think this is an important meeting because I think that it's important that the planning commission understands that the council actually values your opinion. We actually value the work that you do. We know that there's a lot of work and a lot of thought that goes into these projects when they come in front of us. And so it's a good idea, I think, to have these discussions, and hopefully we'll maybe at least see each other's point of view as we go forward. So anyway, with that, I'll open it up. So if you've got questions, concerns, thoughts.
Just a couple, and I think I'll start off the same way you did, in that I think there's a pretty good carrot attached to this. Sounds like it's a pretty good trade, you know. You're gonna gain a significant amount of open space that's interconnected. Plus that prevents future costs to the city with buffering the sewer. So I think there's a lot of great things to that are really good for us. As opposed to that, I think, you know, everybody's talked about the point that, you know, this would retain control or influence for us. So that's good. As far as just like over generalization about the site concept plan, I think we need to consider development to the east, because this is looking like a pretty closed loop neighborhood. So I would say at the end of that main cul-de-sac, we need to probably consider an easement, because at some point, inevitably, there'll be future development to the east of that. I've seen areas built with similar things with alley access to townhomes. It's not my favorite look. If you guys want to go look, that's in Wilsonville, Oregon.
I agree.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. I mean, I understand they're gonna have to hit count numbers. And then the last thing I would just say, I'm not as concerned about two driveways on Hallam as I am overall the road itself, the width of the road, and potentially I know, you know, some opportunities to create safe travel towards the highway. So everybody knows I'm gonna say a walking path, a bike lane, a buffer or something, so that we can make that zone, that area safe, because there's going to be cross traffic between Hart, just given the way that Hart set up the full-size basketball court. I mean, all the things that came into Hart, and it looks like there's some space in here too, but you're going to get, somebody's going to want to go play pickleball. So we just need to think about how that goes from Country Road to main travel. And I think we need to be prepared for that. And those are all my thoughts.
Good. Anybody else?
I went to the West Hills meeting that they held at the junior high, and I know Clayton did too. We both spoke against it. It was a very heated conversation. Everybody weighed in, to include the council members from Camas. I didn't realize that this was part of the West Hills, and they did vote it down. My concern is that we've already got Hidden Meadows going in right across the street, We've already got Hart Crossing going in right across the street, and that's going to town. I just think it's gonna be a lot in a very small area, and I'm very concerned about the survey that we did earlier this year, last year, and keeping our open spaces. I've never been a part of an annexation, I'm not gonna try and say that I have, but I just think this is overwhelming the area for this part of Francis and Camas. Maybe if it were divided differently than 124 dots in a 24-acre area, I might feel better about it, but I mean, I believe in owning your own property and doing what you want to. I just think the density is beyond comprehensive right now.
What's the average size of those lots of the single family units?
They're at least 7,000 square feet. Do you have more to add to that?
No, it does vary. Smallest would be 7,000.
What's that in an acre?
That would be a,
Acres like 49,
yeah, so 7.
so 7,000.
acre.
It's consistent with the conservation zone.
Right, it does fit within that code.
It's about 140.
I would agree with, remind your name?
Sorry, Justin.
Justin. The alley loaded townhomes, I don't love the look of it, and especially if the front doors are facing that open space and it's just garage on the back, then all the homeowners of lots 69 through 76, 84 through 82, anyways, all of those, right out their front door, it's just gonna be a wall of garages, which I think would be not the most pleasant thing to look across as a resident. And then lot 23, looking at it on the parcel map, it looks like it's pretty close to the sewage ponds. I don't know if we wanna do a smell test on a windy day and go see how far the smell travels, but I'd also feel pretty bad to, I don't know.
Your wind is normally the other way.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, one last thing, as you were talking,
Yeah.
where are you gonna put the snow in that alley? You're gonna have all the garages and all the parking spaces for the townhouses.
And then I'd also agree with her. I think there should be more open space in it. I mean, there's 3 pocket parks, but I think that, and yes, we are getting a lot of conservation open space. But I think as far as with how small these lots are with the townhomes, I think it would be nice to include some larger areas of open space within the subdivision. I know that they are building to maximize those lots. It's not necessary all the time. But yeah, I think it would be nice with some larger open space for those residents in the area. Or at least maybe if they put some amenities in one of those parks.
Also, I was really looking forward to Helen going straight through, because I take that road to work, and I don't want to drive past your location. I would rather just go straight across.
Yeah, my thought would be the same there if that ran straight, but I would also mirror this if it's my thought is to put it on the west side of the canal and the entire south side would be driving by open space. You'd see all those, what is it, 20 plus acres of just pasture. And then you drive in from Hallam with the possibility of going all the way to 248. And then the development would be on the west side, northwest side of the canal.
Okay, just for reference for everybody, so the north is this way?
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
So the straight road would go straight through,
North, south.
and then you'd go over the canal,
Mhm.
and then everything else could be on both sides of that new road.
But you're saying on the north side of the canal?
Yes, north and west.
Yeah, My only concern with that is that, yeah, then you lose that buffer between the sewer ponds unless those are huge lots, you know what I mean?
Is there a
That's
code
basically putting
that,
the
that
homes right
prevents,
against those.
is there code that prevents building, like residential building super close to sewage ponds? Or is it just the home value?
It's kind of, you'd like to be about 1,000 feet away from them, if you can. There's built closer.
There's ones in West Jordan that are much closer than that.
There's a city though that's currently dealing with some issues with that very thing.
Not very far from here.
Yeah.
Midway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Campbell Sewer Ponds have houses within,
So there's no code restrictions, but there might be some market restrictions building that close to
Yeah.
a sewage pond.
they're about 500 feet away from the Campbell Sewer Pond, so.
You're saying 1,000
1,000 is a good,
is a good,
buffer.
1,000 and you got the wind, so that's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, you live there, you know what I'm talking about. It rips that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, so for purposes of tonight, so the concept plan, I mean, it's not that your feedback isn't important and wanted, but tonight, that stuff will come later in the process as what the site looks like and all of that. And I think this is helpful for the developers to learn kind of that, but if it would wouldn't be out of line there. Is the annexation something you're leaning towards? Is the annexation something, gosh, you don't want this? Understanding the benefit, if the council says no, it doesn't mean it won't be developed. It will just mean it won't be developed within the city.
Within the city, it's
Right.
not no say.
Is there gonna be another incorporation effort? Will it be incorporated in the county, developed in the county, those kind of things?
Yeah.
So I think Mayor, you pointed it out last time, gosh, this is a lot of units, but man, I really like that we're preserving 75% of this as open space.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually gonna go there next.
Yeah.
Well, I hate the idea of building anything there. But the one thing I do like is that, you know, out of 90 acres, we're saving 10 years, 70 of them, which is huge. And the one thing I do know, and you know, this is just my personal opinion, this doesn't have to really give any weight to anybody, but my personal opinion is the one thing I do know is if we annex this and we come up with some concept plan that works, the one thing I do know is I can guarantee that 70 acres is gonna stay what it is. If we don't, one thing I can guarantee is I have zero control. And by control, I don't mean me personally, but I know that it likely will not stay what it is today, and it will be much different. Now, maybe that's okay, maybe it's not, but the one thing I really, really like about the idea of an annexation there is that it is close to your property, and if that idea with the county goes through, and that your property is maintained as open space, we do have that connectivity, and we now have a much larger portion of open space that, you know, like I agree with Bob, it would be nice if you could drive by and see that open space. You know, it makes it a little more palatable, but I'm also kind of personally leaning toward wherever it is, whatever we can do, if we can make it connect to others, that's even better. But wherever it is, if we can maintain large tracts of open space, I'm interested. It doesn't mean I'm all in on everything, but I am interested in saving as much as we can. And the conservation subdivision is not a perfect tool, but it's about the best tool going.
And I think one thing we need to talk about too is they came to us over a year ago, and asked us to annex, we said no. They went to Camas and says, hey, are you interested in annexing this? And they said, well, you're in Francis City's annexation declaration area. They came to Francis and said, you know, what do you think? And, you know, we'd like to keep that annexation declaration line, you stay here, we stay here, but if we were to deny them again, I don't know legally where that goes. Do they go and say, look, Camas, we tried to annex them again, they said no. Here's what we'll do, will you annex us? I think they can go talk to other people, they can, you know, if West Hills was to incorporate, they can go talk to them too, so. That's just something to think about, is this is not the first time, and they've gone other places. You know, if you go to the county would say, go talk to Francis. Well, we did twice. So we'll work with you in the county, and something could happen, then we have no control.
Why did we turn it down the first time?
They were developing on both sides of it, and they really did. They listened to us and they come back with a much better plan. Not that I like it. You all know I don't like it. I told you that.
Since you're brand new, and we don't have the map up, we have bridges over the canal in 2 locations. We had 160 homes throughout the whole entire land.
Just on bigger lots.
There were a mix of bigger as well as some small. We had to also kind of keep with the 1,000-foot barrier from the sewer plant. So we were in a sense giving the city about 28 acres of open space because it was adjacent to the ponds.
Yeah.
So whatever that would ever become, we don't know. But the rest of it was all residential.
How, what if, because I do like the idea, especially with the concept that there's 500 permits that could be pulled. Like, Francis is growing no matter what. There's gonna be more cars on the road, more traffic. So in order to provide some sort of abatement for that, I do like the idea of getting that road going through. What if and I support annexation. What if we got that road through, and then does the conservation land, does it become like the conservation, like some of those like parks in Oakley, they're just like open space, you can walk through, but it's like preserved and more naturalized?
So,
That's all for discussion.
yeah, really can be up for discussion. I think really the idea is that.
Open space for sure is the requirement.
Right, and remain open space
And then-
and probably ag.
Oh, they just like lease it out to.
Yeah.
Could be pasture.
The marches for the cattle, you know.
And one thing we thought about too is we have to get rid of our sewage effluent.
Yeah, I was going there.
You have to get rid of the sewage, what?
Effluent,
The water.
Water.
The water that
Last
comes out
minute.
of the.
Oh,
thing after it's treated, and we've got property that we can irrigate with it.
okay.
We could maybe irrigate it, so if we did that on this,
The beautiful green space.
you wouldn't be having people walking through it.
No, well,
Come on.
But you-
at least for the first 30 days.
Will you raise trail beds?
Right, well, but the other thing is that it becomes pretty valuable ag land,
Yeah.
right? Because you basically have all free
Free
water
water.
they can use.
Yeah.
And not only that, to point out that connectivity, but it basically abuts, if I'm not, it butts right up to us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So like, we already have 40 acres plus another 8 acres right there that the city owns that we're gonna keep the way they are because we need that for purposes of distributing the water from the sewer lagoons. And so it does provide those benefits. You know, and again, we can talk about this concept and tweak it and do all kinds of negotiation when it comes to exactly what it looks like.
Would the developers be okay putting in a system of gray water to get that gray water back to the residents for us to water our yards instead of culinary water?
Can't do that.
Dang it.
We'd have to put up a sewer treatment plant, so.
Yeah, those
We
are
can
ponds,
only use
not,
it for agriculture.
not treatment.
We
Good
can't.
thought, though.
I'd love to not pay for that.
Yeah, we have to put in a whole new treatment plant to do that.
Dang.
All right, so you guys are here. Thank you for showing up. If you get a big fat no from us again, what's your plan?
We have no choice but to ask you to redefine your annexation boundary so that we can go talk to the county and to Camas and possibly a new incorporation.
Okay, so you're going to develop this land one way or the other.
Yeah, because then.
I mean, we blunt, I'm blunt, you be blunt, yeah, it's gonna get developed one way
What about that
or the
existing
other,
lot?
and
What about that existing lot?
Oh, it'll stay. The
No.
the home that's there now?
Yes.
Yeah, that will stay.
Doesn't
And
this show that it's built over it? Am I missing?
no,
No.
it's still there. It's hard.
It's right
to-
there.
It kind of blends in with the townhomes. This is it here, and then all those trees.
And then
that green.
the green area
Yeah.
is kind of a quasi park as it sits
Is it
right
their
now.
yard right now?
Excuse me?
Is it their yard right now, that pocket park? Would it be their property or would it be
No,
the developer?
No, we'd make the lot the size of the house with a little barn behind it,
Oh.
a decent size. But yeah, just to get more open space like you were talking earlier in your context.
And there's some established trees there already.
Yeah,
that
the
would be
streets
nice
and
to keep.
everything.
Yeah.
The only thing that would be demolished, there's a existing old, looks like a grain silo or
Yeah.
something there. That would go away, unless people want to keep it as a, a monument or something. Historical issue. Yeah.
Do we have
I
a
mean,
monument?
the thing with the townhomes, and listening to your comments too, I mean, if you want more, parks like within the development, I mean, we could lose a townhome easily and do that just because of the lay of the land and how it's all situated around the existing house. Yeah, but that's work to be done yet. When we get further along, it's really early.
Well, again, talking about the concept, and I beat this like a dead horse all the time. We don't need to get too hung up on it, but the one thing to consider, and I don't know what the real answer to this is or how we negotiate this, but if we decide that we want to annex it and we want that road to go through, there's a potential that we then are on the hook to build that road rather than Summit County. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it necessarily, but it is something that we got to consider.
I think we should have
And
that
I think we should have
buttoned
that,
up with the county
that discussion.
at the same time.
I agree, because we don't, I think we need to try to get them to contribute whether or not
We annex their town.
we annex.
This is Allen or this is Allen?
This is how.
So Allen is a city road.
So get
Yeah.
the conversation with the county ended up at the same time as the annexation?
Before.
Whether before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
before.
as part of that process.
So we know how that construction is or should it.
We would really like to be a part of that, because as you know, we went down that road,
Right.
Summit County a year and a half ago, because they have two plants. They have one going through this property, and they have one to the west that they promoted and did their analysis 4 years ago. They, in their report, state that they don't know if they'll ever build it, or if it's 10 years out, or 20 years out, or what.
Right.
And it would be very advantageous for all of us. We knew if indeed they wanted to run that connector from Howell all the way up to the freeway, or they might go with their alternate route. Because if they want to put it through here, like you were saying, some of this property is city property, some of it's county, some of it's developers. We need to find out what we want to do.
Well, with Hidden Meadows going in and the Heart Ranch at the rate it's going, they're crazy not to. They're absolutely out of their mind. And if this goes in,
Yeah.
they're out of their mind if they don't do it.
Their other trajectory goes further west, and then it connects up to Democrat Alley.
Right, we're Democrat.
I think for the city, I think our best alignment is connect to Howell.
I agree. I think so too. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense to have to turn onto Lambert and then make another turn. That's,
Well, you
What's
turn
our-
and you wind around and then.
It takes
Yeah.
forever.
What's the cost of building that road?
It's been long.
Yeah, and it's
Probably
25 miles an hour,
$5 million
yeah, I mean, there's little kids all over it.
how far is it, do you think?
Oh, it was from the canal up.
Yeah.
It was. It wasn't.
From an Onyx.
No, all the way to the highway.
Oh.
To Democrat Alley, right? It would connect. to-
No, it would connect the rest of the 248.
248.
Like,
Yeah,
really well
it was
there.
under 2 miles, but it was probably close to that.
Did you say 5 million a mile?
No, he's
Or
no,
one- 1 million a mile?
It's about, it's just about a mile.
Blinking light.
Is it a mile?
To count
It's just
on
over a
2
mile.
miles.
It's just
so
over
it's-
a mile. So I haven't done the calcs on it anyway, like I used to. What is it, Scott, for is it a million mile or 2 million mile now?
I don't know how big a road it is.
Yeah. I do know the bridges from a company I'm working with in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
They can build the bridges for about 160,000 a bridge, but that doesn't include roadways and everything else. That's just the steel structure part.
Yeah, we'd have to work with the canal company to.
And it would probably double using it.
1.02.
So I mean, anyway, that's a consideration, something to be thinking about. I don't think that should be necessarily the deciding factor. I mean, maybe it is for some people. For me, it's not, but it's definitely something that we should consider and have worked out. so we know what the plan is going forward. Especially as we work through the concept and how that really works and how the layout works. I guess, again, for me, the biggest thing is I'm willing to take the heartache of having more homes than I want in order to save as much ground as possible. I don't love it, but I think that's my big thing. The more ground we can guarantee stays open, I'm pretty happy to look at those.
Who owns the conservation land after it's put into place?
It depends. Sometimes it's maintained by the HOA, sometimes you get it in like a land conservancy, or sometimes the city. It just kind of depends on how it's worked out. I don't know what the idea is on this one, probably the HOA would be my guess, but I don't know. Like in Hart, it's part of a specific lot where at least portions of it are owned by whoever owns that lot.
The easement itself isn't, I think,
But the
the
easement-
easement I believe is owned by the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like you're gonna get a 2/3 deal out of very, very often. It doesn't seem like, we're giving up 30% to get 66.
So the difference is the density, right?
Yeah.
So the idea behind the conservation subdivision plan is that you cluster on smaller lots, the homes together, in order to preserve as much open space as you can. And that was the whole design behind that subdivision and that section of the code. And so Hidden Meadows is that way, Hart Crossing is that way, Stewart Ranches is that way. Those are the three in the city. And whether you like development or not, they've been successful in preserving a lot of open space and keeping the rural feel. And then the other benefit to this, and you probably are involved in this more than I am, but the moderate income housing stuff that is such a challenge across the state. I'm not saying these are going to be moderate income housing, but
Will any of this be preserved, or I know we can't require them to commit a certain percentage to affordable housing or moderate income housing, correct?
so this conservation subdivision has a component in there.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, there's an additional density. Is that the townhomes?
It's the townhomes.
So the townhomes,
At this point, it's 100% of the townhomes
Yeah.
will need to meet the 80% to 80 to 120%
yeah,
of
and-
Summit County AMI.
Which is not affordable, no.
No.
no,
No,
It's
like,
more affordable.
literally, affordable housing is 80% or lower AMI, right?
right.
So,
Of Summit County.
yeah, of Summit County.
Yeah, but it's one of the things that we've heard consistently, and Francis isn't big enough to have to
Submit.
have all that and submit that plan.
Yeah.
But what the city's been hearing for, and Shannon can speak to this as good as anybody, the mix of housing in Francis is you can get the trailer or the $1.5 million home.
300?
Yeah, for $3.5 million. I mean, there's very little in between. So you get the 7,000 square foot lot in a clustered subdivision. The price, it's still gonna be a Francis price,
Like 800.
but still, it's better than the $2 million option for an acre lot kind of thing. And so, does it get affordable? No, but it's not as unattainable as the $3 million option.
Less expensive.
But it does create additional,
You're gonna bring in professional families, like, there's no doubt about it.
For sure.
but it's,
But you're not gonna exclude the people, you're not gonna get all the people who just want ski home.
Right, well, that's the problem, like,
Yeah.
some of the time, I hear from some of the residents and folks, and I even sometimes go down this train of thought, well, let's just do bigger lots. The problem with that is if I do this whole thing full of 1 acre lots, we end up with 90 trophies.
Can the HOA, will this be in an HOA?
Yes, we would require that as part of the conservation subdivision. They have to submit
Require-
CCNRs.
Do we require that there's a certain percentage of primary homes or primary residences within the community?
I don't know if we can require.
we
that.
don't,
We don't, but I don't know if we legally, can we do that, Brad?
Because that
I
could
don't,
help
That would help a lot.
depress rates.
Could, yeah. I don't know.
I don't believe we can. I think that's if we can't require that, but if the HOA wanted to require that, they could. But if I'm an HOA, candidly, why would I want to do that?
Well, there's a lot of HOAs in like Utah County or when I worked for Vineyard that would require a certain percentage, like you could only have like 10 or 20% of those homes be non-primary residences.
So you mean rental units or you mean
Rental
secondary?
units. Just because, one, that's encouraging buying homes, two, that's
Limiting investors.
limiting investors. And that was the biggest problem we would see in Vineyard is that, especially being so close to college communities, that there was a lot of investors.
So you're not talking about second homes, you're talking about rental properties, making renters.
Oh, I'm talking about anything that's not a primary residence.
She's talking both.
Well, yeah, okay, but there's two sides to that coin.
Oh, there is,
Because if you have second homes, there's less impact, but
More tax.
yeah, but they also cause house prices, especially in
Oh, for
this
sure, they do.
area.
Absolutely, that's why I said there's two
Yeah.
sides to that
Right?
coin. Yeah, for sure. Oh,
There's
Like,
definitely
is this more
that.
Like, do we want more money,
No,
or do
no,
we
no.
want to preserve housing
Brad
stock
just
for
said,
future
each
generations?
residence costs the
Exactly.
county.
Yeah.
You don't
It
make
does.
money off of it. He
No,
just
for
said
sure.
that.
Well, that was at the
But-
single rate.
We're a little closer to.
But is
Yeah.
that something the city council wants? Do we want to preserve housing stock for future generations, or do we want more money? City councilors.
Well, I mean, honestly,
Honestly,
honestly, yes,
Both,
Well,
both.
yeah, I mean, honestly, both, because the problem is that as the mayor, I'm struggling,
You gotta balance it.
yeah, because our budget doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
And so as much as I want my kids, your kids, everybody's kids to stay here, we can't continue to fund the city.
Yeah.
Without more money.
Yeah.
I just don't know how we do
So we develop commercial and then
it.
we,
Commercial is huge.
and then we encourage primary residences.
Yeah, commercial is huge, because that's where you
We do
actually
have commercial.
start to get some revenue.
It's in the process.
Commercial is
Approved,
definitely.
yeah. Commercial people tell us they don't run out of enough house lots.
That's what they
That's
say.
true.
You don't have enough rooftops to make a pencil.
Right? We don't.
We've got commercial development property and people
Yeah.
develop, but we can't get people to actually build.
Yeah.
Because they can't get stuff to happen.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
one's been approved for what, 2 years?
At least two.
Yeah.
Francis Commons was a couple of years ago too, and they're building all the residential, waiting on
Wait on
the commercial.
get me started on Francis Commons, they promised us.
Okay,
now this
Village of Lambert Lane was supposed to be commercial a long time ago. We haven't seen anything.
Is there opportunity to still in our?
We did get an animal hospital, veterinary clinic. So
That
that's-
was not part
That's not
of
bad.
I know, but that's commercial.
It is.
Just to alleviate those concerns, we have been talking very aggressively with several coffee shop, restaurant people about our site. Now, they would say the same thing that you just said, and you said, Scott. Well, okay, we can get in early because we'll capture the working crowd that's gonna build all these homes in Francis Commons. So what's that mean? Okay, we break ground now, we get ahead of the game a little bit. But at the end of the day, those people are gonna be here and they're leaving. We need enough rooftops to sustain this coffee shop, restaurant.
Yeah.
And that's always the chicken and egg
Yeah.
problem. When you're at this stage.
Yeah.
You're getting closer with the rooftops that are approved and are actually being built versus the ones that have been sitting there and nobody's touched it yet. So then you'll start, the commercial guys will be like, okay, there's enough traffic, there's enough volume.
It's a real problem as a developer of some commercial stuff. We have one just in the county, just outside of Hideout right now, and Hideout wants us in there. They're almost saying, we'll give you whatever you want. It's that bad. But what business is gonna go and suffer and not survive?
Well, and you mentioned, others have mentioned, these vacation home concepts like you see in Toohey and Victory Ranch, Golden, and all that. They're not there. They're there certain months of the year. So it doesn't really help the cause. Hopefully, what we did at Francis Commons and what we think we can do here, it is permanent resident first time buyer classification. But
First time buyer. So.
Yeah, I mean, a 7,000 square foot house here, yeah. Or 7,000 square foot lot here,
I mean,
yeah.
they're gonna buy first time in the city, and then they're gonna move up here.
sadly,
First time single family.
single family,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're not
That's
gonna
better way to
compete
put
with,
that.
obviously, with the 2A and Victor Ranch. Those people are buying,
Oh, yeah.
they're buying everything for cash. They don't need it worked.
Would you guys look at doing any light tech or anything?
Light tech,
Low income housing
Oh.
tax credits?
Well, it's interesting you said it. What, I know Francis is small, but what about, a fee in lieu?
I don't even know.
Can you explain that concept to me?
Well, sometimes, it's kind of works like an impact fee though. One, it has to be targeted for that and used during a special. But if you were to build a fund to actually build affordable housing somewhere where you want it, and developers who are required to do an X amount, and we get a fee in lieu, which is just a cash payment.
You can reinvest it in
But
the.
you got Park City, right?
Yeah.
Park City. Fee in lieu of what?
Farmington does that.
Can we get a staff report on that?
Instead of low income housing, they pay a fee, like an impact fee, just like trails.
That's a code revision.
Yeah.
That's a code revision, but it can be done.
Interesting thought. Anyway, I think from a global perspective, I think that the juice is worth the squeeze. I'll just borrow the old analogies I've heard before and say that I think, yeah, we can iron out all the other details, but I don't know where else you're gonna get 60 some acres in open space out of this deal.
yeah, exactly.
Anybody else got anything?
Just have one question. How far does our culinary service go now? Does it go to this property?
As part of Hidden Meadows, it will go right by it.
Yeah, so it can tie in easily.
'Cause right now it's at the intersection of Howland and Lambert.
So now you have, but you design it with Hart and Hidden Meadows.
Yeah, he's gonna take, Hart has to take it up to their sub, or Hidden Meadows has to take it to their subdivision.
Is it gonna be big enough to supply these other 107?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So we typically design to cover our annexation declaration area.
Does this project, is it sewage, does it run to the lift station and then back? Or will it gravity feed?
It's probably not gonna gravity.
I think it's low, yeah. I think that's-
It's below the lift station.
It's below the lift station.
So we're gonna have another lift station?
Yeah, you'd have to boost it.
It's something we can look at, or we can look at low pressure sewer like we did in
McNeil Acres?
Hidden Meadows.
Oh.
The Hidden Meadows is gonna be all low pressure sewer. That way we don't have.
Build that
lift
sucker
stations.
up about 40 feet and just make the ground.
Build it up high enough, you can just float in the sewer pond.
Yeah, just build her up, man.
Make a little canal.
There's a couple big hills of dirt like over here on 32, maybe you could just dump it over there. Another million times and they're like.
I bet the vet lady wish she had filled in that.
Oh, gosh, yeah, that's so. All right, well, anything else?
Yeah, so I'd like a little bit more information from everybody to give to the developer, the applicant, so that they know what we're expecting when they come back to our planning commission and city council meetings. What do we want to see different on the concept plan? It sounds like we want to look at potentially the Howland Road extension, adding more park space within the development area. Did I miss anything else?
I think you're gonna need a easement space on the end of that road that curves around. It's gonna get developed
Oh, for
going that
the
way.
east.
Yeah, so that they don't build right in the middle of that. They need to be built on the outer edges with a 10-foot or whatever the easement
You
is.
talking about a stub road?
Well, yeah, you don't have to stub it through, but you need to at least have it in the plan so that we can bulldoze their grass and put a road through. I just don't wanna see a house I don't wanna see a house get built there to where you couldn't carry it
So we
through.
will have some connectivity.
Yeah, it just makes more sense to me. And then, of course, I'm always gonna say, we gotta figure out what to do with that road and how to connect the path so people can safely walk or ride horses.
You're talking Lambert?
Yeah. Just because they have so much of that frontage and we kind of miss that on Hart.
How I safety ride horses is when cars are coming, I just ride in front of them. They either
And they
stop or
slow
they
down.
one or the other.
You're just over that big insurance you got there.
And he's not lying.
I've seen him on a horse.
He goes by my house all the time.
No, and that's just my thought. Like, can we figure out a way to make that safe, so that people can get access going primarily?
What's the right of way distance that we would need for that extension?
We require 60, but
Depends on
I
how
know the
the
road
road
probably a little bit wider.
Yeah, the biggest challenge with Lambert is there's all that, I mean, that's a huge project undertaken.
Well,
Like,
part of the problem is it still belongs to Summit County, some of it.
yeah, there's definitely some challenges there.
And they're willing to let us pave it.
Just lay the groundwork so that we can not miss the opportunity. I'm not saying we have to, it has to be done, but it needs to be.
No, I agree.
So we need to have a conversation with Summit County and have some answers about how that would work. if
How
it's
we can
annexed.
connect it.
Okay.
Maybe the road could run down the west border of the east border of the property. And then that way, they wouldn't have to change their concept plan too much, they wouldn't have to make those widening efforts. But if they could just run it along and then the county could bring it back up. If that makes sense, if you look at all.
No, Eastern.
Just follow the canal, you mean?
The issue is, a couple of issues we got is, one, we want to tie in at Howland Lane. So we want to tie in at that.
We want to have a four-way
We want a
intersection.
four-way intersection.
Yeah.
Roundabout.
Another issue we've got is to cross the canal, we have to cross at a 90-degree angle. We can't just go across and we have to go to 90-degree angles. We gotta work out that with them, so, there's a few things we need to look at.
If you came down to the east border of their property, it'd be easier to cross the canal at a closer to a 90-degree angle.
Oh, and then put the road
Yeah,
by the
then
sewer
we're on
lines.
Howland Road intersection.
Yeah, then you're
Howland
talking
Just
Lane.
the intersection,
Yeah, this is Hallam.
yeah. You wouldn't-
So you gotta go, it's like, and then back out. Is this a pond here?
No, not even
Yes.
going down, yeah, so I know you wouldn't get your four-way intersection, but if you just went down Lambert to the west border of your property and went north,
That's actually one of the
East,
concepts.
east border.
County talks
That's
about.
the
Western.
yeah.
That's even further, so.
I mean, I guess my only thought is if you're not gonna get your four-way, you might as well go left and go out to where the infrastructure already is.
Engineers only like four ways.
It's-
There are a lot of things.
Yeah, I can squeeze out like this and then they can just cut it straight out.
Yeah.
I mean,
Katie, in response to, I mean, I think it's, yeah, it's fair that, if you want to move forward, know how people feel. Like I said last time, and I mean, a lot of my, what you said, Kim, there's so much along the west side. I'm on the east side. And that's a lot of housing there, right in that area. I know we don't know when these 500 homes, which could be, bare minimum 1,000 people, which is supposed to be our 20-year goal, right? We're adding 20% to that. I can't say, I wasn't here when the 500 homes were approved, piece by piece as they were. But I think if we go back, maybe we'd say, no, let's not do it to some of those. And we're adding another 100 to it. I think as, speaking for the town, that's really hard to sell. That's there is a carrot of the open space. It's already open space, and maybe it won't someday, maybe it will. We don't know how when it's gonna be, but for me to say, let's add 20% to the possibility, that's gonna be very difficult for me to do. There's a lot, just the impact of what we currently have. When these homes get sold, they're being built, the ones that are going to be built, we don't know how that's gonna impact, the city, traffic, everything else. I'm concerned about, the one just east of me on the hill. You probably are too, Shannon.
Oh, no, I
And,
love waking up
you
at
know,
6 in the morning and hearing those machines go.
But we don't have anything,
Is it
anything
6?
near what's going on right over there. So,
Don't get them in trouble, they're just warming them up.
They shouldn't have warmed up till 7.
Don't be telling them I told you.
We don't need more problems we already got.
Yeah, just.
I've just been impressed with the ability for like the Yers who were able to keep their property open space because Summit County stepped up to the table and gave the money to keep it open. I mean, just because it looks good now, I mean, there's no telling, like you just said, that that other piece isn't gonna get developed. There's nothing to guarantee that that's not gonna get developed.
Which other piece?
Well,
The
there's no
tops.
guarantee that some of that your property's not gonna get developed. We're talking about being developed right now.
Well, not all of it though. They're
No,
trying
not
to
all of it, but some
they're
of it.
trying to keep a lot of it open space.
Right, they are.
Same with this one.
Some of it's gonna
Isn't
be
that what we're
developed.
doing? Isn't that what this is?
No, this is dense housing, all in one little area of Francis.
Well, we're saving seven, I mean, I don't need to convince you, but we are saving 70 acres of 90.
For now, for today.
Yeah,
No, it's forever.
It's forever. It's.
Once it's in
written down,
conservation easement, it's there.
Yeah.
With the potential to make a
The
huge
only way out of
connection.
that is it has to be condemned by a public entity. Like, is it possible to condemn a public easement or a conservation easement? Yes, but it's very expensive. UDOT did it to expand the West Davis corridor in Farmington, and it cost them $28 million to condemn it. And the city took that money and went and bought other open space to preserve it.
I just think that we need to reconsider the reason why we turned it down last time. And we voted against it last time. I think we just need to sleep on it, cool our jets, really think about, go over there, look at all the development that's going on at Hart now and what's coming in Hidden Meadows.
it's a great, I think it's a great plan. I just think it's a lot of homes for right in that area and a lot of homes adding to the city. But it is in line. I like the open space. I think it's really good, but that's where my trepidation is.
Did you
Well, we're not okaying it tonight.
Right.
We are.
Right.
We're
I just I want you guys to know how I feel.
Yeah.
No, I
Well,
appreciate it.
yeah, so we are.
So the future land use map, just a reminder, shows Ag 2 zoning. How does everyone feel about asking for Ag 2 zoning instead of Ag 1 zoning?
What does that do to the, cuts it in half, like what's it?
A little more than half. Well, okay, because the incentive goes up to 20% if you do Ag 2, so they'd have half plus like a little bit more. So you're looking, instead of 106, you'd be looking at maybe 56 to 60. I have to do the math, but.
I would rather see that. I would rather see a bunch of second homes in there than 145 or whatever.
I think it's 107.
106.
106 is proposed.
It's 84 single family and then the rest were town.
Right, 21 town.
I mean, I think that's worth exploring, right? Like, we can certainly explore that, and we can have those discussions for sure.
After we agree to annex it.
No, we would want to nail that down before annexation in an annexation agreement. That's why I'm bringing it up now, because we absolutely would nail that number down and include it in the part of the annexation is establishing zoning. That's one of the biggest choices we'll make, is what zone will this be? So more important than what the concept plan looks like is what is the zoning that we're putting that property on that property, and what does the annexation agreement say?
So Ag 2 would keep the open space though, less homes, or would that just full open space?
No,
it would
you
be.
could keep the open space. It may not be the same percentage though, right? Like,
Yeah, it's gonna be small.
They could change it.
Well, it could be more open space. It could be
Just
more.
depends.
It depends on the
It
layout.
could be no open space. They could build 60
They could be
lots.
Well, they wouldn't be a conservation.
It would be conservation subdivision, so they
Right,
build.
but they could build 45, 46 2-acre lots, potentially.
Well, and so I think that it's worth exploring for sure, that which zone, I mean, that is, as Katie said, that's one of the major decisions that we'll make here is what is the zoning? It's worth exploring whether or not Ag 1 and Ag 2 fits best. It certainly is worth that. I mean, there are things to weigh. The Ag 2 puts less density, but it does not help anything be any more affordable. In fact, it
makes
increases
it
those
way
values a lot more. So. in
But
order-
then we're not dealing with as much traffic. We're not
Yeah,
dealing
we
with.
actually,
No, I agree. I mean, that's why I'm saying there's definitely things, wait, it might be the exact right answer, or it might not, I don't know. It's worth
Yeah.
exploring. What were you saying?
Your thoughts, sir?
I don't know if you guys seen, because I got it late last night, we have I guess you'd call it a traffic. That was
I think we
reduced.
got that. Yeah, I did put it in the Dropbox, and that kind of leads me to my next discussion topic before we end. So the reason I'm asking these questions is I want everyone here to feel like they have enough information to make a decision about this when it comes up for a decision. I don't want you to come to planning commission and say, oh, I really wish we had a traffic study. This is the time right now to say, we want a traffic study. And they provided a memo. So I'm not sure if that is adequate for everyone.
I'm going to admit that I have not taken the time to read that memo.
That's okay. I just put it in this morning.
So, yeah, so the memo, so the people, A-Trend, who did the traffic study for Hearts, Hidden Meadows, and for Heart Crossing too.
I think it's at both.
They did both. So I talked to the head engineer, it's a single guy shop. And so he took the numbers from Hearts Crossing and Hidden Meadows, and then plugged in our concept plan and what it would entail. And that's what's in that report. It's a explanation that the corridors and the areas are able to handle our addition. Yet to be determined is some of the turning lanes, stuff that might be added at four-way, let's call it, for how it is, but it does, give you at least some information that, okay.
Is it just with the increase of your guys' subdivision, it's not the other subdivisions that are coming in the area?
No, it's because he did the research for the two that are already approved,
So he-
one being built, one to be built, and then he will farm numbers each of those to see if the streets.
And that's a complete build out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what the thing said.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this is just out of respect. So, and I don't even know if you'd be willing to do any of this, but is it, like the Mountain Lands do build your own home things? Could we incorporate 20 of these homes to be some of that, or is that something not even, that's a Brad question.
So the Mountain
Do they have to
That's more of a
be?
developer question.
Oh,
it is, but-
They want to sell.
But I mean, they could do that.
I think that is a good program, and I think has helped a lot of younger families and people that wouldn't otherwise be able to live here or come and live here. But my understanding, and Tini, I think you might know more about this, is I don't think they're doing that program any longer. Mountain Lands has decided.
Yeah,
that
they're
it's
not
working.
doing it anymore on here.
They can't, the reason they can't do it up here is because they can't,
Afford it.
the bigger lots, like in River Bluffs and places where they did it, try to make bigger lots affordable, it's hard. And people have to make changes lots. They might be able to look at something of these 7,000 square foot lots, they might look at something like that. That was one of the reasons, is they couldn't find.
Doesn't pencil.
They couldn't buy the property and build the houses with the big lots.
Anthony, did you hear any other problems with that program? It might have been why they stopped doing it.
No, it's just affording, because you see that the lot, the 60 lot that was there was all planned with a prior developer. And so they had to take it as it is, that's why we got that. And they were, I mean, the last time I spoke to Scott, you were saying they were trying to buy lands out here, but it's not even available.
I talked to the Mountain Lands people, they came to the library one night and they were talking about, they changed over management, they're being sued in Heber because they weren't completing the homes the way that they were promised to be done.
I think I
And
heard
they're
that.
looking at getting a new manager and then they're
They
gonna
just
try
got
and
a manager.
for
Yeah, and I
the
think
property
Scott
to
came
do
back.
it. So it is a possibility, they're just going through a difficult time right now.
They're going through, because some of my friends who got homes over in the Silver Creek villages, because of the costs, they were trying to cut costs because they didn't want to go back and they were not getting more loans from rural development, and so they had to interiorly provide loans, and the participants, like me, were unhappy. So it all comes back down to affordability.
Which RDAs can give loans to affordable housing.
Yeah, there's a certain percentage that comes off of the CRPA you have to use for affordable housing, not moderate income, but affordable.
And it's gone on now.
Okay,
As
that
far
was
as
just,
this goes,
I mean,
I
that
think
would
that's
be
a great
great
thing to
information to get 20 of our kids here, you know, or 10, however many.
yeah, as far as this goes, I support the annexation in two ways. One, I support it if we want to look at the larger lots and have it be larger lots, we can go that way. Or two, if we go to smaller lots, I think that we should request, if we legally can, that they're set at a certain AMI or lower where we could get families in.
Okay,
Or that we look at it requiring it as primary residences, both situations.
studies, so sounds like we have, the traffic memo.
So yeah, the question is the traffic memo enough or do you want to study?
I don't know if we're gonna be able to answer that tonight, because we just got the memo today.
Right.
I think we could have Scott
Opine on that.
look at it and kind of give his opinion once.
Traffic studies are hard because right now it's saying that the road can handle the capacity with the new homes. So if they do a further study, it's just gonna reiterate that it still can handle the traffic.
Does the traffic study tell you when it fails?
Some, depends on what we require, we can require to throw in some growth and in 20 years, you know, what could happen, stuff like that.
Well,
The numbers that where it fails with what numbers, yeah.
The other challenge with those is that, we know what Lambert Lane is, and we know that it's kind of narrow, and it's, you know, it's like the 500 and all of those things that they may or may not take into account. But they may say, well, it can handle the traffic, and we still go, well, yeah, but can it actually, like your opinion of handling the traffic and our opinion of handling the traffic might be very different, in that you say, sure, it can handle it, but what's the standard of safety that you're using and what's, you know, like.
Well,
I know they do this a lot, but I guess.
That's the whole thing, they look at it, you know,
It's a little subjective.
You know, the road's this wide, it can handle this much traffic in a day safely before it gets, you know, when you say safely, does that mean everybody drives 25 miles an hour?
Right.
No, was everybody not on their phone? No. So it just looks at it and says, yep, it can handle this much traffic without you failing at the intersections. And that's the big thing, is one of the intersections that we approved with Park, we've made a turning lane, there at Lambert Lane at 32. You know, those are just some things we could look at, but I think getting the road from Hallam to 248 is a big deal.
I agree. I mean, that eliminates a large portion of that traffic going down.
Can we look at an intersection analysis there?
Yeah, they can,
Is there any wetland concerns on that property?
Well, that was my next thing, is that it's something we should look at.
Oh, I would think sure you can look at it. I mean, my guess is that most of the, if there is wetlands, it's in the open space, which is fine, but.
So
But
do we
my
want
guess
to
is
require
we
a
need-
wetlands analysis in the proposed development area?
Well, I don't know how do we generally do that? How do we decide that? I mean.
They can't develop it if it is wetlands, don't they have to
Or
do
they have
that
to
anyways?
relocate them.
Right, so I think,
they'd
what we
have to-
usually do is look at the national wetlands inventory.
I think we need to at least look and make sure, but I don't know, like, if it appears that it's not in there, we probably don't need to require a study. I'm not sure.
and it depends on which year and which administration.
It's very political.
They could do a study today that says they are not wetlands of the United States. And then a year from now, if they did a study in 2 years, like, there's one campus that if they don't do something within the next couple of years, it has to be redone. and it could completely change. They said there's no wetlands on it. It was done under the previous administration, so there was no wetlands on it. And that could change if they don't develop it next
What are
door.
we at here?
Okay, so this is the National Wetlands Inventory, and the green,
So you need to move the screen to
am I totally in the wrong spot?
Left, right?
I thought I knew where I was at, but
There's the sewer ponds.
there.
this is the sewer
It's saying
ponds.
everything is wetlands. So the
This
county
is all-
performed some wetland studies. No, that's not it.
This isn't it?
To your,
Down
to your
to the
left.
Oh my goodness, I am, oh, I see, okay, yep, I was turned
The
around.
county has done some
There we are.
wetlands when they were looking to put the road through in the first place, so.
So there's no wetlands in
That
that
little
property.
green
In
dot,
the
but
subdivision.
Right here,
Yeah, just a little tiny bit.
and then some here too.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So what would you propose, Scott, for you to feel like you can?
So what year is this current, like,
This is just something they did from aerial photography a long time ago, probably 20 some odd years ago, these maps were created.
because a year ago, right now, I'll bet you it all, that was.
Yeah. But
But,
if you scroll up towards 248, all the stuff on the old Wagstaff
Yeah.
property, see how much wetlands is on that map right now? Nothing.
nothing right now.
And part of the thing is when that canal is full, when the canal was built, the farmers complained that it dried everybody on the west side of the canal up. And so there's check dams installed from just, north of 248, there's a check dam, and then from here to before it drops down the hill, there's check dams that are installed so that there's water always in that canal.
Right.
So it sub-irrigates the land so that the water stays there. When we built our sewer ponds, we had to do a wetland study, and we had to set some piezometers to check the groundwater level. One day I went there, the groundwater was within 2 feet of the ground. The next day it was at 5. And I drove to the canal was empty. So they'd empty the canal for 2 days. Once they put the water back in, the groundwater jumped back up. And so if they do their study right enough, they could probably get the majority of that, if that is considered wetlands today, removed,
So the real question is,
whether or not it's wetlands.
one, is it wetlands? Two, do we require the wetland study or?
I think we have to.
Yeah, I think we need to at least get something going, whether or not it's,
It needs to be looked at for sure.
yeah, whether or not they have the Corps of Engineers sign off on it, because takes them forever to do something like that sometimes. But if we get a good study done by a reputable firm that looks at wetlands, that to consider.
Okay. Do we need that study before we make a decision on annexation, or before we hit some type of development milestone?
I think before you have a concept plan approval.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
think.
for sure.
Which is part of the annexation.
I would think they would want to go because if it comes back.
Because right now, that's showing that some of where they want to develop is wetlands.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like, we're not committed to having to do a traffic study, but maybe, looking at the Howland Road and that intersection and then wetlands.
Like, I think they can get this guy to do a study and the intersections closer and stuff like that. If they're doing wetland study, they can do that at the same time frame. So.
Okay. All right, anything else?
I have nothing else. Anyone? Come on, it's only 8, we could stay here another hour.
5 AM for you or 4:30?
No, I'm a paper clip, no. They used to have, yeah.
I was thinking about the horses, but.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. All right. Well, good. I appreciate everyone being here and your input. Important, so I appreciate it. I'll take a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Aye.
You were staring straight at me. I had to.